In video. Yay. And it's brain stuff, so yeah, I don't know what that means exactly, but that's what it's going to be. Modern mystic, So on his website, he does this. It was mostly, about oil and energy and money, but now it's sort of about philosophy, and so he's doing these typey thing instead of videos. It's all rather anagrammed, trying to put it into whatever modern twittery language. He's twittering on the subject of consciousness in a bunch of one-liners, and in my opinion these are sloppy use of words. So it's a hard problem, and that I've always pointed out, and nobody gives me any kind of feedback that's reasonable. It's not a hard problem. I mean, nature's not a scientist, so obviously nature makes a calculator that isn't necessarily efficient. It just gets the job done, and it had to build it one little tiny piece at a time, so it's really messy in terms of all its mistakes are still in there, and all the things are just piled on as features. So it's not really the way to design something. It wasn't designed from the ground up and then produced. It is produced one stupid, let's bend this out this way, and that works better. Let's break it and hit it and smash it, and then, oh, that's an improvement, and so let's glue some other crap on there. That's nature. Doesn't construct things in some sort of linear, well, it's not even that it's linear, it just doesn't do it ahead of time to create efficiency by realizing that these two things would be better placed at different locations, kind of like penis and anus, that kind of, well, especially vagina and anus. Big mistake. Anyway, so yeah, it has a lot of things where you just say, boy, that's obviously stupid. So, and the brain has those too. So anyway, this whole consciousness thing. So he's basically doing this, there's no need for consciousness argument. And in a sense, that's true if you can figure out some way to create prime directives or value. Because that still has to be created. You still have to, if you're going to create artificial intelligence, you have to create it. Either you create all the judgment necessary to understand good and evil as hard programming, that it doesn't learn itself. It's not artificial intelligence, it's completely put in there as a prime directive, knowledge, that kind of thing. Or it's going to have a mechanism to acquire knowledge of value. So, simple argument is that's what our brain's doing. It's acquiring knowledge of value, it's making knowledge of value. And it's making it by having this thing happen where we do this feeling thing. So he's using words like see and conscious, and never talks about feel. So never talks about the qualia element that creates the value, that creates the motivation, that really creates the action. You don't do something without being provoked to do it, not by what you see, but mostly by what you feel. And so it's in my opinion, cheating the argument to have a conversation about seeing the world and reacting to it when we don't just see it, we convert the sight into a feeling, and then we react to the feeling. So the brain's really doing, as I point out, two things. First part of the brain is establishing what's the prime directive today, in the sense that depending on what I'm feeling, I'm going to see something different and I'm going to react different. If my leg just got broken, I'm not going to see stupid things like, oh, there's some bird dew on the windshield of my car. No, that's really not going to be something I'm probably not going to see, because my prime directive has completely changed. I'm not looking for little problems now, because I have a big fucking problem. And that big problem is saying, it's not time to go hunting, it's not time to go to work, it's not time to do anything, it's time to limp and scream like a woman. So yeah, so this is just not a, what he's doing here just isn't nearly adult enough in terms of the depth of the conversation, and he's pretending it's all very deep because the brain doesn't really need to do anything, and it's kind of bullshit. So as I've pointed out, there's no action without a value judgment, a value statement, a prime directive, a bit of programming that says this is important and that's not important. And so the brain has to manufacture that. And so nature had to manufacture that for us higher beasties that have various mode options. We can be in modes. Okay. So the prime directives can constantly change. Mood changes based on feeling, disposition, and that changes reaction, behavior. So the disposition of the entire brain, in a sense, is something being changed. The programming is changed by being triggered into a different mode. It's not like and some of that change is permanent because that mode is recorded as a memory, and that memory becomes part of the programming. So it's like we're constantly being reprogrammed, and we have different mode flexibility based on that previous, the end result of those previous encounters with feeling. Yeah. Okay. So it's all kind of just, I just say, look, the key thing to know, the key points, what are we looking at? The first principles here is to first understand nature's not a scientist. It doesn't have a brain. So it's a crude mechanism that's constructing a more complex mechanism, and it's not going to do it perfectly efficiently. So yes, it's going to have elements in it that can be described as, you don't need to have that in there, but in a way you're going to need that to be in there in some way or another, unless you come up with some other mechanism for a brain, a thinking thing, an AI, to synthesize value. And to do it, okay, again, without any programmer, without any human who already knows what smart is. So make an AI that starts off as a wheat seed or something. Here, I just dropped a piece of dirt on the piece of paper. Now make an AI out of that that's going to grow knowledge of good and evil, or productive and destructive, or any of that shit. It can't acquire the knowledge without first understanding what the truth is, and that the truth is better than a falsehood. So first it has to value the truth. First it has to value the acquisition of knowledge. First it has to acquire all these kinds of values, these agendas. And what's that going to be made out of? How are you going to create that sense, that perception that this is important? So the argument I'm going to make is that I don't even know if there's any other way for a machine that has no intelligence, and it can't program into the thing instant intelligence, that it has to sit there and make something that can create that. And that if you do that, you're probably going to end up with something that has to actually feel. It's going to have to do this innate good and bad thing, in the sense that you're going to have to create something that is innately bad, like a repulsive, horrid feeling, pain, extreme pain. It just is bad. No matter where you put it in the universe, bad idea. The neurons that make it, it's just a bad arrangement. It's intrinsically hostile, nasty, fucked-hearted, crappy. And so it's like the whip. It's you've now created a mechanism to whip. You've created flesh that can be harmed, so to speak. And you have to have that first to establish value. And now you can whip something harder, or you can take away the whip, and now it can understand, not pain, pain. And those two things will be easily understood as good and bad. And now you have reward and punishment, and now the brain can learn, because now it's being rewarded and punished, in a sense. Alright, so it's all this, almost talking like the underwear gnomes. You know, A is the brain senses, B is nothing, C is it acts. And his argument is that there's just A and C. There's just a circumstance and an action. And it's much more complicated than that. And then he ends up comparing it to, somebody asked the question, is a plant conscious? You know, because he's doing the A, B bullshit here. And then his answer is this convoluted mush, and he ends up talking about amoebas. And using the word conscious. So what's the point of having this word conscious if it's not going to include the creation of the sensation? The creation of sensations. Because, frankly, I don't see how you have our consciousness without the sensations. So you have to account for them. You can't just ignore their existence. They have a qualia that is created. You have to say, yes, there's qualia created, whether it's just made out of blah 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 blah, you know, dingle dangle, zippity zap. It doesn't matter what it's made out of. The fact is we're tasting it, so you can't say it doesn't exist. It obviously exists. So I don't care what it's made out of. I mean, I don't think it's relevant in the sense that we know it exists. We know there's something that's, no matter how you look at it, you can't turn it into good. Just can't do it. Anyway, this is why I use C. It makes it easier. Well, you use conscious down here, so, and you're using sense in other places. So what's the point? I don't understand. Seeing is perceiving, let's say. So it's sensing, like even if my eyes are closed, I can visualize because for some reason. So I can even see sixth sense wise, in the sense that I can create my own vision of what's out there based on my memory of it and see it, even though I don't have to see it. So I can hear something, create the thing that I know is associated with what I'm hearing, dog barking, and then I have my eyes closed and I can imagine the dog there, and it might be very close to the reality. So I can see even without eyes, we could argue. So we're talking about perceiving in the sense that we gain some knowledge of the external world. And what happens when we do that is our body reacts. And what I'm arguing is some of the reactions are from the external world. Young virgin tied to railroad tracks, train coming. I emotionally react. Okay, I have feelings. The prime directive becomes be a hero and get laid. And I'm motivated. Ooh, I'm getting a chubby. So the scenario is not just the reaction, it's the setup to the reaction. First thing that's changing is my prime directive is changing. Now my brain is processing, calculate how to get her off the tracks, how to untie the ropes, chew them with your broken teeth, something, whatever. Come up with a strategy. Pick up a rock as you're running, pick up a sharp rock so you can cut the ropes. It's doing all the calculating of how to accomplish the hero task. It's all the reaction. It's all automatic. My brain's going to use all the knowledge it has to come up with the answer as quickly as possible to get the job done. And that will all be automatic. But the first automatic thing happened was my brain used its knowledge of good and evil, and of reward and punishment, and of pleasure and pain, and it figured out, I want to get laid. And now it changed the prime directive. Now my prime directive is, instead of whatever I was doing before, which was whatever, cleaning up dog do or something, now my prime directive is be a hero. So you have to account for that. Let me just account for any of that in here. Yeah, so I guess I'll read this just because it's kind of mushy, and I'll just get to the end because the end statement is just, again, it's just this, what the fuck are you talking about? Because it's, again, this idea that somehow our 100 billion neurons don't do anything, and that all I need to do is shove an amoeba in my head and I'm conscious. Now, amoebas aren't conscious. They're not doing what I'm doing. They're not doing anything similar to what I'm doing. They're doing what a cigarette lighter is doing. You spin the little wheel and the light, the flame pops out or something. They're doing something completely different than what I'm doing. What they're doing is like a calculator. You push the button, a little bit of da-da-da. It's even less than a calculator, but amoebas don't have a fucking neuron one. So why are we talking about amoebas having consciousness? This is silly. Well, obviously we're doing it because you have some kind of agenda, and then when people ask you what your agenda is, you say, "Oh no, I don't have. No, I have nothing to see here." Yeah, just do. Don't listen. Whatever the the Yodiism is for the let's hide my agenda behind some sort of I'm just giving you the truth. No, you're not doing that. You're defending some kind of mush. There's a woo-woo song tied to all of this. Have yourself a merry little woo-woo. I mean, it's in here somewhere. Alright. This is why you see. It makes it easier. In a simple cause and effect world, again, it is a simple cause and effect world, but we have to concede one of the effects is creating a thing called a feeling that has a intrinsic value component. In creating, look, any AI is going to need the valuer. It's going to need a program that does the valuing, that says it's a prime directive to find the truth, or it's a prime directive not to lie, or it's going to have to establish that. And the funny thing is to establish what's valuable. And the funny thing is that when evolution built our valuer, our prime directive decider, it did it by creating something real that's really valuable. It created real negative feelings, a real hard negative suffering. It created it. So because it needed a synthetic valuer, but it accidentally, and I would say accidentally because it doesn't know how horrible this idea was, because it doesn't understand that all these organisms meet each other, are torturing each other, and that's just horrible. But I'm just saying the huge waste in that creation of a real value to merely synthesize survival priorities. Alright. In a simple cause and effect world, if a ball is coming towards your head, your eyes send a message to your brain, best it can, representing what is happening, just like modern science says happens now. I don't know, that's not even saying much. I mean, obviously what's happening in our head is a whole bunch of things, not just one thing. It's not just a knee-jerk, it's a knee-jerk tied to a knee-jerk tied to a knee-jerk, and some of those knee-jerks are establishing value, which is a fundamentally interesting thing to be establishing. In the brain, there can be a system whereby when the eyes send in this particular message, it activates the duck mechanism, right? So we can have pre-programmed, almost automatic responses. So I can, I was juggling the other day, and I didn't think I could still juggle just because my stroke hand was a little bit bogus. But it was funny. I hadn't really tried, and yeah, I could do it still. And it surprised me how, I can catch well, but the funny thing is the stroke hand still isn't very good at pressure. So it's not too good at knowing how hard to throw something. So it's a little bit off. But anyway, it's not bad anyway. This is not how modern science says it happens in you now. Modern science says that the amoeba brain sees a thing coming and takes appropriate action. In the brain, there can be a system whereby when the eyes send in a particular message, it activates the duck mechanism. This is not how modern science says it happens in you now. Modern science says that the amoeba brain sees a thing coming and takes appropriate action. Well, modern science is wrong. There's no amoeba brain, so that's nonsense. I don't understand what that is. So he writes in, I don't understand. I mean, you can't, refuses to be direct. In a Darwin survival sort of way, the seeing is not needed. By seeing, he's saying, okay, you could. Well, I don't know. I don't know how the seeing can't be needed, unless you're saying that seeing isn't all perception. Seeing is just one kind of seeing. I just don't even know. Obviously, you have to first. Your brain first has to recognize something, and then once it's recognized it and called it something, then it can figure out whether it's good or bad and whether or not the appropriate action is. And each one of those things is a cause and effect thing based on a compilation of information, and some of that information is instinctive or pre-programmed by the genetics, like feelings, and some of it isn't. Anyway, in a Darwinian survival sort of way, the seeing is not needed as long as the appropriate action is taken. Well, so he's using seeing as a way of saying conscious, so we could just knee-jerk our way through life because we don't need to necessarily feel our way through life. But again, the seeing, I would agree that much of what we see, we're better off not seeing. You could make that argument that the seeing doesn't do us any good because it just creates hysteria or some other crap that would be totally unnecessary to us just doing what needs to be done, which is limp or something like that. But to say that, again, this is like wearing seatbelts, right? Most of the time they'll save your life. Occasionally they'll kill you, right? So 70% of the time, or 80% of the time, it'll save you from harm, but 20% it'll get you harmed more. Well, that's the way the brain works. Some of this stuff, okay, over time will help, but there's always a percentage of the time where that feature got you into trouble. That smartness got you into trouble. Curiosity killed the cat. Well, that kind of thing. Yeah, most of the time it's a good idea, but some of the time it's a really bad idea. The message from your eyes does not have to lead to seeing. So he's just saying this idea of the right now I don't see my brain communicating with my liver. So yeah, and it doesn't hurt me any because it's all automatic. It does all its shit. I don't have to be conscious of any of it. But we're not talking about maintaining a liver. All it has to do is lead to the appropriate action being taken. Right, but the appropriate action is going to be dependent on the prime directive being changed. And understand, the other part of the prime directive thing is your own disposition, your own strength. So part of the prime directive, part of the fundamental process is, do I have big balls today or do I have little balls today? Do I feel a little feeble or do I feel strong? And that's going to be an internal mechanism that has its own clock of cause and effect. So, am I tired? I mean, I really fucked that bitch last night and I'm wiped. Is there some mechanism in my recent past that has changed my capacity to react to the circumstance the way I would have if I wasn't? Oh man, I'm really wiped out. Yeah. The message from the eyes does not have to lead to seeing. All it has to do is lead to the appropriate action being taken. Well, again, over time, that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about percentages and probabilities and special circumstances of unique environments and all that kind of crap. So this is just, like I said, this is just too simple, too whitewashy, laid to painty. But there is seeing, and that seeing is called consciousness. Well, that's what you say. I'm saying that consciousness has to be tied to the full flavor of consciousness, including the feeling of sensations that have qualia, that are sensations that are throbbing pain, or sensations that are relief from throbbing pain. The amoeba is conscious of sensory inputs. Dangerous rhetoric. Insane, I'd say. The amoeba is conscious of sensory inputs. It just isn't. It's not conscious. It's not doing what this 100 billion neurons is doing. My hand is more complicated than amoeba. If I cut my hand off, are we going to argue that my hand is conscious of sensory inputs? Yes, it's still going to have reflexes and it's going to have mechanisms in it, but it's not going to be conscious of anything. It's not going to be able to evaluate good and bad and say it's appropriate for you to feel pain or it's inappropriate for you to feel pain, or it's not going to do any of that kind of cause and effect. It's not going to do any qualia here. It's not going to do anything connected to being conscious. I mean, why are you doing this? This is not helpful. When, in theory, it does not have to be. So again, I would concede that you don't need a value-making mechanism if you can construct for me a diagram of how you do it without pre-programming it. How you take a piece of dirt and drop it on the table, or even a CPU chip, and I say to you, you can't pre-program its registers. You can't give it knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong, good, bad, productive, destructive. You can't give it a prime directive. Now make it do something. Make it learn. Now if you can show me how you can make it learn without giving it any value program, then I'll concede your argument. But until you can do that, until you can show me how something that isn't pre-programmed can acquire knowledge of good and evil, good luck. Because that's what it needs. Not to need. Not to need consciousness. It needs to be given pre-knowledge. It needs a prime directive established by some mechanism. And again, the argument is the whole reason why we're conscious and the amoeba isn't is because the amoeba only does the same reactions. Inputs of a whole range, same reaction. It doesn't do a whole variety of actions. No, it just does a little pre-programmed actions. And we don't. We change the prime directive constantly, and we change what we can do about it constantly. Never have the same programming day to day. Programming's changed every fucking day. Amoeba today was doing the same thing Amoeba did yesterday, the same thing Amoeba did 10 million years ago. Amoebas don't change their programming. We do. Alright, I think that's probably enough. I don't have to beat this to death, but I have beaten this subject to death and I don't get any rational response. And everybody just, all these people are just talking this wooey stuff like consciousness is complicated, blah, 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 and it's all such a big pile of crap. I mean, you know, Ludwig Wittgenstein. Oh, fucking A. I mean, I just love people citing pretty much lunatics. As this is where we should get our knowledge from. Nietzsche and Wittgenstein. Crazy, dumber and dumber, or crazier and crazier. Yeah, that may be it. Crazier and crazier. Yeah, great idea. That's a little bit aggressive. Yeah, sorry. Exactly what that's doing there. Anyway, I don't really like this WordPress shit. I didn't realize the whole article was here. It takes forever to load anything. You load it, and why don't they just have a little thing in the comments open up? I mean, it's just so they have to go to a whole new page. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So that's all I got to say. There's no... can't make much sense out of it. I don't know why he's doing this. Well, let me get to the line he does where he just says, you know, I'm not selling shit. Yeah, here we go. Alright. Oh, it's this idiot. That's spreading the net very wide. No grumble with the approach. It would include many critters, not. Many critters, not. Yeah, of course it wouldn't include many critters, not. I think all the beardy weirdness says that all this consciousness... I don't know why people have to keep putting a crap in here. And I'm wondering where you're going with this line of thought inquiry. Here we go. Don't worry about where I'm going. Get yourself comfortable or not with what consciousness is. Yeah, sorry. I don't think you're describing what consciousness is, because you're leaving out the most complex element of consciousness, the most glaring, obvious fact of consciousness, which is there's two engines running. The value engine, make the problem for us. Make something out there a problem for me. Okay, that's one engine. And then the other engine says, solve the problem of me feeling. Solve my problem with that problem. That's what the brain is doing. Two engines. One, create the problem. I feel sad. Two, fix the problem. I feel sad because that old lady is going to get run over and I don't think that's right, so I have to go help. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that anymore just because most people suck, and I just figure, yeah, let them get run over, fucking bitch. Kind of lost my empathy for humanity because, yeah, when you really go through each person and you actually poke at them a little and scrape at them, you find out they are reptilians. I mean, they are assholes. It's hard to find something that's really, it's not an asshole with just a lot of makeup on. Mystic, for example. Yeah, you scratch at him a little bit and he starts telling me amoebas are conscious. It's just like, what the fuck, asshole? You retarded? Shit. What are you up to with this crap? It's nihilism is what it is. He's a nihilist cunt. Don't worry, be happy. Ride your bicycle, eat some vegetables, blah 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 blah. Eat some cheese. So sick of these cunts. I don't feel like being depressed, so I have to come up with a fucking fairy tale to live by. Everything's made out of gingerbread, don't worry. Fuck you. I'm just seeing, see, that's what happens. I just start thinking about it a little bit and I just say, God, people suck. They suck.